GrokTALK is 2 hours of news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com. But don't limit yourself to GrokTALK. Check us out at GraniteGrok.com. Follow us on Facebook or Twitter by searching Granite Grok. This is Steve from GraniteGrok.com, and you're listening to GrokTALK.
GrokTALk.
I have a question. You want me to turn you on? I'm turning everybody on.
Do you want an answer to your question?
Would you walk? No, sorry. Fabulous Thunderbirds. You know, it's good to be here.
It is.
And Rick is showing us a picture of an empty star chamber at the New Hampshire legislature.
Yes, absolutely.
And our liberty is most secure when they're not there. Or as I say of Congress, don't do something, just sit there. We don't want you to pass laws. There is no need to pass laws most of the time.
We do. We have this discussion all the time. If we had another 100 legislators, they'd get even less done. It'd be great, you know.
Actually, there was a little something on Instapundit that said, we do not know of all of the federal laws that result in criminalization. Nobody has ever put such a law together. And it'd be very interesting to see how tightly constrained we are in our normal everyday lives and how many laws we actually screw up over in our personal lives just because we don't know them. Know what they are. And
you broke 4 laws getting out of bed this morning.
But you know,
there are estimates that most people break multiple laws in the course of every day, laws or government regulations of one sort or another. And I maintain that this is tyranny, because when you have arbitrary and capricious laws and law enforcement where nobody knows what the law is and the government can use any of them against you at any time, you are subject to tyranny.
Well, let's ask Dr. Cooper.
I was going to ask that because isn't it one of the main legal foundations is that citizens should know what is legal and what is not,
and should be able to learn it for themselves.
Correct.
And
Dr. Julianne Cooper's here from Liberty Harbor Academy.
And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. We've been trying to get you in for a couple of weeks, but you were unable to make it, and we're glad to have you.
And I'm here now.
You're here now.
Once upon a time, it was said fairly that ignorance of the law is no excuse. I don't believe that's so anymore.
No, because, I mean, when the Roman Empire, this is the historian in me,
this is why you're here. Go for it.
What we need.
When the Roman Empire pulled its act together, it actually published the 12 tables of law so that anyone who was literate could look at the 12 tables of law, and that was the law of the land. And they knew when they were breaking a law and when they weren't. When Napoleon rewrote the laws in France to the Napoleonic Code, his belief was that anyone with a reasonable education should be able to understand the laws and be able to act as their own lawyer.
What does that say about the state, both of our laws and our education today?
Yes. And I believe we have the shortest constitution in the world. It is tiny compared to most. And I have a friend who is from India who he and I have had long discussions about, because the Indian constitution is the longest constitution in the world. And it is modeled after the United States Constitution. The difference is that they have tried to enunciate within the Constitution every possible law that they can think of and enumerate everything in it, when the genius of ours is that it's short.
It's short, sharp, and to the point, and mostly tells government what it can't do.
Right.
And doesn't Obama hate that?
No, he's not paying any attention anyway. So.
Well, I don't know why he's still there, but.
Well, you know,
because we haven't got enough people with enough courage to impeach him. If we had any honest Democrats, I know that's an oxymoron, he'd be impeached by now.
So anyway, let's go back to the original question.
Right.
Which was, what can we do, or how do we look at our general public knowing what the laws are and what's happening around them? And I think one of the things that it's going to be our job to do this year and the next couple of years is to educate a public and develop ways to educate the public, or to, in a sense, con the public into educating themselves about what's happening. Because I have a neighbor who many of you know how adamant I've been about Common Core and fighting Common Core, and she has a daughter at Central High School, and I walked over and said, "What do you think of the Common Core?" And she said, "The what?"
Yeah.
I mean, I would guess that probably 50-60% of the people who have kids in school don't know anything about Common Core.
Well, we have to have Kim Kardashian start reading it out loud.
Oh, yes.
This week on the Kardashians, we read Common Core.
Yes. Well, it would be a near impossibility.
That's true.
I'd stand a better chance of doing that if we did it on the Osbournes.
Yes. Well, I saw one of the Common Core lessons for 9th graders showed up on my Facebook, but it was a biology lesson on DNA, and it had a chart that gave the DNA sequence and the blood types of a list of people, and the idea was that the student would figure out.
I saw this.
The mother was trying to figure out
who the father was,
who the father of her child was, and it gave options such as the cable man, the mailman.
Yeah. Does that not tell you about our culture?
This is a biology class. And fortunately, some parent managed to get their hands on it and started to raise a stink. But the problem with Common Core is that by mandate, no lessons can be changed. So a teacher who receives this and who wants to keep teaching in the classroom has to use the material and cannot change the material. You can add up to 15% to, you can put your own, this is what their argument is, that you can actually put your own touch on it by adding up to 15% to the material.
You can stick a daisy on it.
Right. But you cannot change the material itself. And they're finding that in the math classes, there are literal mistakes. It's the wrong answer.
The stuff makes no sense.
Right.
My granddaughter was given a very confusing math problem, and the teacher had to change the values in the equations to make the table work.
Right. But that's actually going against what she's being mandated to do.
15% doesn't come close to even being able to explain what some of these problems are.
Right.
And there was another one going around where it was sort of a pre-algebra at the elementary level of a word problem, and you had to put the equation together of you see 4 towels on the beach. Someone comes along and lays a few more out. How many towels are there on the beach?
Right. And my husband was telling me about one that Marcy had candy and wanted to give all of her friends an equal amount of candy. And she had 6 bags and she had 8 bags. How many pieces of candy do the friends get?
Yeah. I mean, this is...
You don't know how many friends there are, you have no idea nothing.
Yeah, this is absolutely ludicrous.
So, well, now here's the thing. We were talking about how do you educate voters? How do you,
right.
I mean, and this is a huge barrier to that, because moving forward, if we are unsuccessful with this particular batch, the next batch is going to be too stupid to tie their own shoes, which may already be a problem. It's a huge problem.
So they'll go around with white jackets, wraparound arms, and safety slippers.
Yes.
And they'll all be on the next list. Okay. All right. Well, that's our show for today. Thank you very much. No.
What do we do, Doctor? How do we get through to these people?
Okay, this may sound ridiculous on its front, but I think we have to start with people who were educated prior to 1970.
Okay.
Which, for the most part, are grandparents.
That would exclude me.
Yes. And, well, you don't, you're already
You're already part of the trickle-down education.
But
yes,
I mean,
yes,
if we start with the people who understand the education.
I'm sorry, I was in first grade.
And push them for teaching their family and in getting their family engaged. And then we have to go to the parents of the school-age kids today. And the school won't do it. So we as a population and the people who see what's going on are going to have to start even more doing something and not talking about it. I mean, we started the school. My husband and I started the school because we sat around bemoaning the fact that the kids that we were getting at the college level knew less and less and less. We taught for 20 plus years, and I was actually having to spend more time explaining things like the timeline, what BC meant to 20-year-olds.
BC, that's a comic strip, yeah?
Right. They didn't even know that because the comic strip hasn't been around.
They aren't familiar with it. So.
No.
They don't know what quarter of 4 means.
Oh, no, they can't. They cannot read a.
It was on Howie Carr yesterday.
No,
they were
can't
talking
read
about how people don't know. They don't know how to tie their own shoes.
That's one, right?
Yeah, they don't know how to. They don't know what quarter of 4 is. They don't know how to make change. They don't.
Students don't know how to address an envelope.
Well, how about how many English compositions have you had to correct that are written in phone text format?
Well, they don't dare. Because what I do when they send me a email, I simply send it back and say, when you have corrected all of the grammar mistakes and the spelling, I will be glad to read it.
Good for you.
Good for you.
So I even get. Okay, I have.
Thanks for not doing that to me.
The sergeant major will inflict corporal punishment.
Yes, I have a student who graduated under me 15 years ago, who I just recently got an email from, and it was a fairly long email. And at the end, he said, it took me a long time to do this because I had to make sure there were no mistakes.
I mean, we'd be in trouble all the time
Right,
on
right.
Granite Grok, but we do try to do that education. I mean, that's why we do this show.
Right.
That's why we do, as well as the advocacy part of it. But a lot of people don't understand what's going on and why we say the things that we do. It's almost, if you
But you're
listen to
preaching.
Rush, you're always hearing about the Limbaugh Institute of Advanced Conservative Studies.
Right.
And, it's true. A lot of the people who don't listen to his show don't get the joke. And it's a sad joke that to get to the advanced conservative ideas, you have to understand the floor of how this country was founded
yes.
and built in the first part. And I swear to you, every single day, more and more, I believe that this educational dumbing down of our historical foundations, our founders, and the philosophy behind that has been done on purpose.
Of course it has. It's been done on purpose, and I can document that.
Yeah, there's
Literally,
another aspect to that too.
There's plenty of documentation.
The playing field is so aggressive and so intimidating that a lot of people won't even step onto it. I know people at work who ask me how I can stand it, being in this mess every single day, talking about the politics. If Arnie Duncan and Debbie Wasserman Schultz were drowning and you could only save one of them, what kind of sandwich would you choose to make?
And how would that make you feel?
Yes. Right, directly out of Common Core, right?
That is Common Core, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a word problem.
Yes.
So, I have a woman who's she's like...
The answer is they're both socialists and I celebrate. Next.
So she says, I don't even want to listen to this stuff. And that's really the point. Right? With the education, with the engagement for adults, they basically scare them out of engaging.
Well, and
absolutely.
the education system literally says students may not take home material.
And that, to me, is the biggest imposition because government exists to make our lives easier. We contract out some of our responsibilities and what we do to government to be able to do things like plowing our roads and educating our kids. We have contracted to them. But now, oftentimes I see the teachers and the administrations believing that those kids belong to us.
Quick break.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
Okay, so
Steve McDonald here. Molly Shaheen, Senator Jean Shaheen's daughter, has a very expensive LA apartment where she lives and works, but for some strange reason, she voted here in New Hampshire. Elena Biden, niece to the man a heartbeat away from the presidency, well, she never lived in New Hampshire at all, and she voted here and went back home. New Hampshire Democrat Emma Roos, invited her adult children to leave their homes in Virginia, Washington, D.C. to claim they lived in New Hampshire to vote last November when they went back home. New Hampshire State Senator Martha Fuller Clark, vice chair of the New Hampshire Democrat State Party, she had a whole bunch of people who aren't from here living in her home, including a paid congressional staffer and an ACLU lawyer from Arkansas. They don't live here. They all claim to be claiming to live here just so they can vote here and then leave. That's not all the Democrats who showed up to steal your votes and then leave, but that'll get you started. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
GrokTALK. Okay, we're back. Sorry.
Because we never stopped talking in between the breaks.
We didn't. We kept going, yeah.
So just to do the short version of that, what we have noticed is that with Common Core, the materials are not allowed to leave the school. The kids get sent home with badly photocopied pieces out of the books for their homework. So the parents never get to see the whole travesty of education that the kids are being subjected to.
Right. And we need to make this happen. Now, whether we begin to maybe, and I'm just throwing out some ideas here, but maybe union leader begins to put a education, just an insert into the papers on a regular basis, educating on what's happening and maybe a conservative organization produces them.
That's not a bad idea. What if a conservative star were to write history lessons for kids,
Yes.
for example?
Right.
Maybe illustrated with a talking horse.
Yeah. Well, then you have to,
Did you know he's on his second one? It's coming out next month.
Well,
Rush Revere and the Brave Pilgrims, and I think
Yep.
now Rush Revere and the something or other Patriots.
By the way, I returned that copy of your book. It's in your living room.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Well,
I finished listening to the audio copy recently.
the issue with that is that you're talking to the choir. I
Yes.
mean, you're talking to people. Rush is talking to people. Of course, it's a huge number who are listening to Rush, and they're buying his books because it's Rush. But we need to get to the people who don't usually do that.
But those books are written, and the audio tapes are spoken, and they're very good, by the way.
Yes, I have it. I bought it.
To be accessible to the kids.
Yes.
The early teens, and I think it appeals a great deal. And if the grandparents buy these and pass them down, we can make some progress.
Right. But
You're not convinced that's...
Well,
that's
no,
not
but
enough.
I know the problem is that if that's all the students know, and they are trying to put that together with what they're hearing in school, we might have made an inch movement.
Right.
And they need to be hearing it in a way that it is a whole lesson, a whole education, because it's just not at this point.
I think really, I'm not sure that we're going to reach the vast majority of the public. I think a lot of it, when you get to the point where Jon Stewart and the Daily, what's the name of the program?
Daily Show.
Daily Show, is the source or a major source of news for most of the 20s and 30s.
And they think it's news.
And they think it's news. And while there are some nuggets in there, it certainly is not the news. My wife, for whatever reason, likes to watch Good Morning America. It's a 2-hour show, and every once in a while I'll hear it, and I'm going, this is not news, this is fluff. I mean, we've turned away from the hard but absolutely necessary to the easy stuff that means nothing whatsoever.
Right.
And we have a headphone stealer because somebody's got to say something.
Well, no, I mean, you're talking about Good Morning America. You saw my piece I wrote a couple months back about that.
Yeah.
Okay. One of my, in the interest of disclosure, my daughter is a student at Liberty Harbor Academy. And before she started going there, one of the things I told her is I said, if you do nothing else well in life, you need to learn how to write and communicate. Bottom line. You need to learn how to critical think. You need to have critical thinking skills. So when the time came to try and get her into Liberty Harbor Academy, it was kind of a no-brainer,
Well, the thing that we do at Liberty Harbor is it's not just about writing and communicating. You have to have something to write and communicate. And the problem with the whole education system in this country, the training of educators, is that they are trained in educational theory. not in a discipline.
Right.
And it's beginning, this state still doesn't, but it is beginning to be mandatory that to graduate with an education degree, you have to graduate with a degree in a discipline. And the education is on top of the discipline. But even so, it is so watered down what they're being taught because they're allowed to take. I ran a social studies education program for a while, and one of the things that I insisted was that the students take courses where these are future teachers, where they had to read primary sources, they had to know more than a textbook. But if they took courses in any other area except ones I was teaching, they got a textbook, they filled out the answers at the end of the textbook, at the end of the chapter, and that was their education in that. So I would get students in a methods course who had taken American history from someone who taught with a textbook, and they didn't know anything because, like the rest of the kids who took the courses, they forgot it on the day, the minute they went out. So then they're going to go, we're going to put them in front of a classroom?
No, and I totally agree. We as bloggers, most people don't understand that if you're going to be a blogger, if you're going to be a decent blogger or a good blogger to a great blogger, you have to know your materials. And I keep hearing over and over again, well, we're teaching the kids critical thinking. That's where we're all oriented. They need to be able to think right. And I keep thinking, I can't be a blogger unless I have a rather large knowledge base. That I have to know lots about lots of stuff. I may not know it 6, 7 levels down, but I certainly know first, second, and third levels down.
Right.
And that's the only way, because you've got to be able to see those interrelationships.
Yes.
To say, how does this system work? And you can't teach what's over here without knowing over here, like your example of the DNA.
Right.
Same thing with the math things that we keep coming up with from Common Core. There's not insufficient knowledge bases to ask those kinds of questions.
Right. This is what we say at Liberty Harbor too. The students the students who have been there a couple of years really ask good questions, and they are beginning to really see connections between what they learned in the biology class and what they're learning in the physics class, and they see how all this is beginning to work together. And sometimes they ask questions that we actually can't answer without spending a half hour, 45 minutes, giving them the rest of the story so that they could really understand the answer. And they're beginning to see this and do work on their own.
So going back to your original question, how do we educate the general public, the older generations that grew up with most of this? And I'm in that generation, although it's way back when. I've had to relearn a lot, and Steve tells the story that as he became more political, he had to go back to this primary stuff.
I did, I had to teach myself.
Right, and that's generally the best way.
Mm-hmm.
You see, this is my problem with today's kids. Even the ones who are graduating from college have not learned how to teach themselves. What they do is, if they have learned to ask questions at all, they can ask the question, and then they need somebody to guide them to find the answer. What we need to be teaching is how do you figure out the question and go find the answer for yourself. I had a first-year student last week, say, I don't know which papers I've written for the Western Civ class. I said, what do you mean you don't know which papers you've written for the Western Civ class? Well, could you look up which ones you have grades for? I said, no. You have a syllabus. You have end grade online, which ones are graded. And if you don't have copies of the papers in your computer, I'm not going to answer that question for you. That's what you need to learn for yourself. And this is what I hear from corporate people. The new hire comes in, does exactly what they're told, and then they're playing with their phone. And the boss comes and says, what are you doing? Well, you didn't tell me what to do next. So what we're teaching kids, and Common Core is perfect at teaching this, here is what you need to do. You need to wait until somebody tells you what to do next.
And that's right. And our other friend that writes the Invisible Surf's Collar blog refers to it as the destruction of the axe-maker mind, the removal of all deductive reasoning capability.
Right. Yes.
And just learning to do what you're told.
Right.
We're back to the John Dewey system of education
Well,
for a
that's-
workforce
Well, it
cog.
is.
But it is, and it's very clear that the progressives have been on a tear to make sure they have a workforce that can be controlled.
Yeah.
And they say it over and over and over. So, and we don't want you to listen to your parents. We want to change what you know from your parents. Woodrow Wilson said that. The goal of education today is to separate you from your parents.
Well, that's been the goal of progressivism altogether,
Right.
is to completely shred any foundational attachments we have to our history,
Right.
to traditional values, so that they can remake society of our own. That's why we're called extremists, because we refuse to let go.
Right.
It's really what it comes down to. We refuse to let go. Because without being moored to something substantial, anything is possible. And we've already seen what happens in the last century, what those kinds of things can be. And it's not a good outcome.
Well, without tradition, our kids and anyone without tradition and understanding the traditions, you really are lost. You've had the whole base
You can
ripped
put it
out
on a
from
very
under you.
simple scale. Sometimes my kids will hear something on the radio or TV or online, and they have no context.
Right.
They don't know why it's funny. I'll just start laughing, and they'll be like, they'll look at me, and then I'll explain it to them, and
Right.
then they'll go, "Oh, yeah, that is funny." You know, but when you're talking about history, you're talking about traditions, you're
Right.
talking about government, you're talking about the risk of tyranny. Not having that context
Right.
completely changes your ability to address what's in front of you. That is,
Well, the tremendous upset over unemployment today, and I agree, it's really bad to have the unemployment. That it would be wonderful if we could have almost perfect employment. But if you know the 16th century, when the Reformation took place, and the split between the two churches, the unemployment rate hit 50%. Queen Elizabeth was the first monarch to put in vagrancy laws because so many people were hanging out on the street with no addresses. And then it became that the doors of the city were closed, literally the key to the city, the doors of the city were closed to all those people who could not show that they had an address, place to spend the night. So if you want to know what to do with 50% unemployment, why don't we go back and look at what was going on in the 16th century?
Shut them out to live off the land.
But yeah, because what we have now at even if you say it's 13 or 14 is nothing compared to what people were dealing with then.
Or look at the labor participation rate,
Right.
how low it is.
And they're going to take another 4% off of that.
and Dr. McCoy is going to be calling because she's not here yet.
Yes.
And we'll be doing
She is located appropriately opposite IRS Andover, Massachusetts, which will be part of the conversation. And Skip's going to call her now.
All right. Well, Dr. Cooper, thank you so much for coming in and spending some time with GrokTALK, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
GrokTALK.